And I said, well, make sure you actually extend the closing date. And, well, what's the minimum? And I said, well, you need a minimum of 3 days because of the TRID 3-day requirement. But, so between loan approval, loans don't happen the next day after the approval, 15 days, 14 days, a week. I mean, what do you think that gap should be?
Well, between what? Between the
The 30-day and the closing date. I mean, I think it should be at least 10 days.
I say minimum 5 day. I mean, minimum five. I think minimum 5 day difference, minimum. Because you definitely want to, as I said, as a seller, you don't want to be thinking you're moving, you're packing everything, and you find out the buyer's canceling. It's like, really imagine you were living there, you packed all your stuff, and then you find out for some, stupid reason they're canceling. So at least you want to be able to like have some notice. But all right, so I guess we'll get started. All right, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Got a lot of people on for Saturday morning, which is awesome and amazing. And today we were going to do a class on short sales and foreclosures. For those who don't know me, my name is Giovanni Nicosia. I'm a real estate attorney. I've been an attorney in South Florida for over 25 years. I own a title company called Supreme Title and Escrow. And what we've been doing is classes on every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays on different topics, and trying to really educate you and help you. And of course, be there for you. Any questions, any help you need. And today, as I said, we're going to do short sales and foreclosures. Before we start, I just want to mention, on Tuesday, we're doing a top producer mastermind with Megan Romine. She's with Douglas Elliman. She closed well over $50 million in deals last year. This year she's on pace for more than that. So she'll be speaking, about what she's done. As I said, she moved here from West Virginia, not knowing anybody, and she built her business off of rentals, and now she's selling, multi-million-dollar waterfront properties now. So she's going to give her tips, and also any questions you have, please, because I'm noticing I'm trying to do these masterminds, but a lot of people are not asking questions. Ask questions. I mean, these are people who who have really become successful. So learn from them. Get you use the chance to ask them whatever you want. So I just posted a Zoom link again if you want to sign up. As I mentioned,
what time is that going to be?
11 a.m. Yeah, and I will record it too. Yeah, someone just typed yeah, it'll be recorded. And what else? And on Tuesday, as I said, we're doing a pies and prosecco giveaway in my office. I'm located at 8495. If you're in the area, stop by. Pick up some pies, pick up some prosecco. If we haven't met, say hello, meet. I might even set up my money machine. I think I'm gonna. I don't know if you guys have ever seen my money machine. I have one of those things where you get in and you grab money. So I'm probably gonna set that up too. And on Wednesday, we're doing a $1,000 cash raffle. If you're a member of my the program on AskTheRealEstateAttorney.com, which, like I said, I see, like Ruth, Phil, I see right here, they're members, Andrea. That you'll be eligible for that cash raffle. We're gonna do it on Instagram Live on Wednesday morning, probably between 10 and 11. So, and if you use code LAW, it's the first month free, cancel anytime. So, all right, so let's get started. All right, so short sales and foreclosures. So basically, I've been doing short sales and foreclosures for a long time. Like right here, this is actually my first approval letter ever. It's September 7th, 2006. That's the first short sale I ever negotiated. So what's that, like 17 years? So it's been a long time. Let's say 2007, 2008. Before that, I was doing closings, and people could come in. They were getting these 100% loans. They were getting these adjustable rate mortgages. And I was like looking at these and saying, how are they going to be able to afford this, once it changes? And I felt that they wouldn't be able to afford it. And I was right about that. But what I didn't expect is how real estate affects everything, so basically, when the market started going down, it affected, buyers, then it affected realtors, then it affected, of course, the people the realtors use, the inspectors, the insurance companies, survey stores, and how it affected the whole, I guess, the economy, everything. It's just incredible when you don't realize like how powerful the real estate industry is, in this country, and how if things are going bad, it affects everyone. And that's what happened back then. And even though right now I know, I guess you could say the real estate market's still strong. I see kind of the same thing happening almost with the amount people are paying for houses, the type of mortgages they're getting. Like I did, I was telling Phil before, I did a closing yesterday. It was like a $580,000 closing, just a normal house, and the person's getting almost a $5,000 a month mortgage. Like, and this is just like a single person, late 20s. Like, it's just, to me, it just seems how is this affordable for somebody? It just blows my mind. Like, I'd be scared having a $5,000 a month mortgage, So I just, so I personally think it's definitely good to know about short sales, know about foreclosures. If you're meeting with clients, if they're having problems, yes, a lot of people do have equity in their property right now, but certainly back in the day, I did 3 short sales, just like everybody. I was buying property, investing in property, thinking I was going to make so much money. One property I bought, it was in Pompano, actually for like $225. It was a duplex. I ended up selling it for $7,500, which is crazy. It was, in Pompano. I mean, that's just what I'm trying to show you is like right now how prices are so high. You just never know what can happen if the market crashes. I was a pre-construction I had bought in Melbourne. I bought it for like, I think it was 300 or 3. Well, no, wait. 350, I believe I bought it for. I ended up selling it for 200,000. I bought a property in Hollandale. It was like under like a condo coast. I bought it for like 225, sold it for 80,000. So just showing you like what can happen, like the disparity, like in the prices from when you buy and when you sell, if there's like a crash. So basically, when you're meeting with clients, let's say they're having financial problems, they have a few options. One option is to refinance. But as we know, the problem right now, they're probably still going to have high payments. And if they can't afford it now, where their interest rate actually might be lower, they're definitely not going to be able to afford it once they refinance. Okay. Okay, I apologize for I'm like actually, that's why I'm actually at this desk, because it's closest to my internet. I don't know why, but let's see what happens. So hang on a second. The other option is loan modifications. Okay. Loan modifications basically is where someone contacts the bank to try to get a lower interest rate. Okay. The truth is, banks say they want to help people, and in reality, they don't. That's what happened, like what got people in a lot of trouble in the past. Banks were saying they wanted to help people. They'd be trying to do a loan modification. They'd be going through the whole process, thinking they're going to get modified, and all of a sudden the bank denies them, and now they're in foreclosure and they lose their house. So as I said, that's not the best option. Another option is bankruptcy, but if they file one option is Chapter 13, where they basically keep the house. But what happens is they have to pay the current payments plus past due payments within, let's say, 5 years. They get caught up. But if the person's having a problem paying their regular payment, forcing them to pay their old payments as well, it's probably not going to work. The other option is a Chapter 7, where they wipe out the debt. They don't owe the money, but they lose the house. So that's not the best option. And of course, we're talking about after how it affects them with their credit. When you do a bankruptcy, it could be on your credit score for like 7 years, credit report, like 150, 200 points. That's not a good thing. Deed in lieu is basically where you give the property back to the bank. Like where if you hear someone says, I'll just give the property back to the bank, Truthfully, banks are not in the business of owning property. They don't want the property. Like I said, I've been doing this over 20 years. I think I've done maybe less than 10 deed in lieus. Okay. And first of all, for the bank to even consider doing a deed in lieu, one, they want to make sure there's no second mortgages, no taxes due, no HOAs. They want the property have no problems but their mortgage. So you can't have anything else on the property. Second, they want the house to be listed for 90 to 120 days. They want to first see that you've made an attempt to sell it on your own first. Okay. So it's 2 things. So if you ever meet with someone, they say, well, I'll just give the property back to the bank. No, they have to actually list it as well. It has to be listed. So that's a great opportunity for you to get a listing. Say, hey, let's just try to sell on our own. If not, then you give back. But the bank does require it to be listed. And as I said, no second mortgages, no code violations, no HOA fees, has to be clear other than their one mortgage. The other one is a traditional sale, which of course, right now, a lot of people do have equity. So, people can still do this. But as I was just mentioning before, how quickly things can change basically, overnight, with the property values. And of course, if something were to happen where property values drop, the option is what we're going to talk about today is short sales. Now, a short sale is when a person sells the house. Someone asks, how many days did you say to be listed? Depending on the bank, some require 3 months to 4 months. They want to see, like I said, that you've made a good faith effort to sell the property. They don't want it to be by owner. They don't want the person to have just a for sale sign in front of their house. They want to see you've made a good faith effort to sell the property. Because as I said, they're not in the business of owning property. They're in the business, they're in the money business. So they really don't want the property. And that's, reason why we're going to talk about why they approve short sales, because they don't want the property. They want the money. So short sales where the person sells the property for less than is owed. Okay. So for instance, let's just say you owed 500,000 on the house and the house is now worth 400,000. So of course you're never going to get 500,000. The best you're going to get is around 400,000. So let's say you got an offer for 390. We would then submit that to the bank to try to get them to accept 390 minus the closing cost as full and final payment. If they do, the ultimate goal is that they waive that 100,000. The bank goes their way, you go your way, and you're done. You don't have to worry about anybody chasing you for money. It's a full and final settlement. That's the goal and purpose of a short sale. So why would a lender take less than what is owed? Okay. Well, one, the longer a person doesn't make payments, say I stop making payments today. Well, first, now they're not getting any more payments from me, so they're losing there. Second, now at some point they have to hire an attorney to sue me to file foreclosure. In Broward County, for instance, like the recording, just the filing fees for a foreclosure, it's like, I think it's $1,900 minimum. Okay. Now, of course, they got to pay the attorney's fees. Now, let's just say, November 1st taxes were due. If I wasn't making my mortgage payment, they got to pay my taxes. Then, of course, if I'm not paying my insurance, they got to pay my insurance. Okay. And okay, just so you know, it used to be years ago where foreclosures would go on forever. People would be in their house for like 5 years, no problem. It's not like that anymore, just so you know. What happened is what the banks did, they started like hiring better law firms. Like they hired law firms who were doing good jobs for them in other states and get them to open up office in Florida. And these attorneys were more aggressive and more on top of things, And another thing what the court does now is if let's say I'm representing someone in a foreclosure case, they make me go to court every month to do what's called a status conference where we tell the judge what's going on in the case. And the judge tries to push it along. It wouldn't be like, I used to have like, literally, I probably had well over 500 foreclosure, probably more than that, defense case at one time. And files just sit in the drawers for years without even being touched. There was just nothing going on with these houses, but it's not like that now. Now you actually, so they are faster, but while this is going, but I'd say a year and a half, probably, but before it used to be like 5 years easy. So let's just say at some point they do take the property back. Now, of course, now they gotta pay the HOA fees. They gotta maintain the property. They gotta, if there's tenants there or somebody's living there, they gotta evict those people. They gotta hire, so there's all these additional expense. And also, if prices are dropping, the more it goes on, the more they're losing. So, and as I said, and let's just say the house is worth, they are owed 500,000, and the bank in the house are going for 400,000. Even if the bank takes the property back, they're never going to sell for 500,000. They know the market value is 400,000. That's the best they're going to take. So the banks do approve, short sales. Okay. Now the benefits to the sellers, because you might meet with a seller, may tell you, well, why should I do a short sale? Everyone's making money. The realtor's making money. The title company's making money. The buyer's getting a good deal. Why should I do it? Well, the one thing is they escape foreclosure. Okay. As I mentioned, like, let's just say that the seller loses the house in foreclosure. One, they could have a deficiency judgment. So like I mentioned before, let's just say they owe 500,000, the house auctioned off for 350. They would have a deficiency judgment for 150. And the bank can try to collect on that. They could basically garnish their wages, do different things to try to collect on this money. So now they got to worry about someone chasing them for years to try to collect. Okay. Second, on your credit report, as I said, it's usually about 7 years, 150 to 200 points in your credit score. But when you do a short sale, it's usually only about 6 months to a year, and it's about 50 points. As I said, like I did 3 short sales, and I'm proud I did it, because not proud. I'm just saying, like, I think from the learning from the experience of it. So now when I talk to people, I can speak from personal, experiences. I can't, it's not like, hey, this is what's going to happen to you. I can say, hey, this is exactly what happened to me. And basically, as I said, while this was going on, my credit score was affected, but then after it went up, I bought properties, I've gotten loans, and my credit score is pretty high right now. So it does affect you, but if I let the property go in foreclosure, I guarantee my credit score wouldn't be what it is right now. And there's been so many people that I've done closings for, that I did short sales for, and then a couple of years later, the score gets back to normal quicker. Another thing is, they're really not doing this now, but there used to be a couple of things where sellers would get money. One was half incentives. If it was your primary residence, the bank you'd automatically get like a minimum of $3,000 at closing from the lender. And this was kind of crazy. Chase used to do this thing where they would give people like $25,000 at closing. It was crazy. So you're selling your house, you're waiving your balance and walking out as a seller with a check for like 25 grand. Of course, they don't do that right now, but just like us, when we do a short sale, what we do is we prepare a closing statement. We show, okay, like I said, the sale price is 40,000, commission 6%, and we always put there like relocation fee to seller. Like we put 10 grand on it, and we always try to get seller money. There's no guarantee. Like I never lie to a seller and say, oh, you're definitely going to get money, but we always try to get them some money at closing, like for relocation or whatever. But there's no guarantee, but that we definitely always try. And if you guys have any questions while we're going, just feel free to ask. Okay. So seller concerns. One, as I said, deficiency judgment, where basically, I said how the bank could, go after them for the money. Another is promissory note. A promissory note, sometimes what happens is the bank would say, okay, we'll take less, we'll take less money, but we want you to sign an agreement where you agree to pay us back, let's say $15,000 at $100 a month, for whatever, 10 years or whatever, so and later on, I'll talk you the situations where that happened. Now that actually happened to me, and this is why you should never represent yourself. The property I was selling in Melbourne. As I said, I bought it for $350,000. It was a pre-construction. I was expecting by the time it was built, I'd sell it for over $500,000. Market crashed. I ended up selling for $200,000. When I negotiated the short sale, the blender, IndyMac, which I'll talk about also in a second, IndyMac, it was IndyMac. They basically said that, we'll accept the $200,000, but we want you to sign an agreement that you'll pay us back $60,000. And me, like I said, representing myself and not thinking about it because it was too much, emotions in it. I said right away, okay, no problem. And I agreed to that. Now, to truth, I've never, ever, ever had a client sign anything close to that. Maybe the most 15,000, 10,000, but never had a client sign like 60,000. But here's the way I looked at it. Okay, so basically they're waiving $150,000. Okay. So by me signing the agreement for $60,000, I already got rid of $90,000 in debt, because now the most they could ever go after me for is that $60,000 if I stop making payments. Okay. And with regards to the promissory note, like let's just say a person signed a note for $10,000. Okay. And they stop making payments. These are unsecured notes. It's almost like a credit card. Okay. Do you think the bank is really going to go spend $5,000 on an attorney to sue someone for $10,000 who they know has nothing? No, it's not going to happen. So signing a promissory note truthfully wasn't the worst thing in the world. A seller contribution was another thing. Sometimes banks would ask the seller to give a lump sum of money at closing. This would mainly only happen if they saw like a lot of money in their bank account or something, but that was rare too. But there's the situation with the promissory note seller contribution I'm going to talk about after, where that kind of came into play at the beginning with short sales. Okay, so buyer issues. One is long waits for approval. Even though, in my opinion, a short sale should be simple, they should basically look at the person's financials, do an appraisal of the house, and give an answer. Some of these banks take forever. On average, I would say 90 days. Okay, we've had some approved in 2 weeks. We've had some approved in a year. So if you, so basically, hang on a second. I'll answer those questions in a second. So, for instance, let's just say you have a buyer. Make sure they're educated, like that they know that it's going to take a little time. If, like, I remember once I had one, it was like they went on their contract at end of July, and the lady says, we got to close by August, because my kids need to go to that school. It's not going to happen if it's a short sale. So if you have that situation where someone's insisting on buying in an area for some reason, a certain amount of time, don't show them short sales, because as I said, on average, it's 90 days. Another thing is also multiple offers, where basically the banks would get a lot of offers. Okay, so just with short sales, the people reviewing these are not like CPAs, forensic accountants, things like that. They're just one contract would confuse a lot of these people, but sending them a whole bunch of offers at one time really would. The condo, there's a short sale done, which we'll talk about after, which actually lists some where you check off they cannot receive multiple offers, and that's what you also want to make sure that you check off, that they're not getting any other offers, just yours and only yours. Because this is kind of crazy. And you, as a seller and a seller's realtor, you want to make sure you have a buyer who's willing to wait. Okay, that they understand the situation. Because sometimes with these banks, every time you cancel, they make you start over from scratch. Like, this is a crazy story. Like, we had one, I remember, it was like, let's say 350,000 approved at the short sale, right? And we're close to getting closing, and all of a sudden the buyer cancels. So the realtor lists the property right away, gets another offer for like 385. So 35,000 more than we had approved. We contact the negotiator. Hey, we got another offer for 385. Can you send us a new approval letter? She's like, no, the terms changed. You have to start over. If the terms were the same, we could give you a new approval letter. So what do? We crossed out the 385. We wrote 350, sent it right back to her. She approved it. So that's what I'm trying to say, like what we were dealing with at the time. They threw away $35,000 just like that without, just kind of crazy. So as I said, you make sure they're only looking at one offer at a time. Another thing is condo right of first refusal. As I said, prices at that time were really low. Like I said, I sold a duplex for $7,500. Okay. So what some of these associations were doing, they were buying the units. They were like, so you go through the whole short sale process. The association says, wow, this is being sold for 10 grand. Let's buy it ourselves. And they were buying and then renting them out, waiting for the property values to go up. So that was something with buyers. You go through the whole process, think you're closing, and all of a sudden the condo association buys the unit from under you. Okay. But truthfully, the prices are a lot higher now. So of course, I don't see condos buying them because they probably don't have the money to buy it, especially with everything going on, with fixing the buildings and insurance. So they probably don't have the extra money, but that was something that was going on. How to qualify candidates. Wait, let me just read the question. Okay, Joni wrote, who does the money come from when you say you try to get the money from seller at close? So what happens, as I said, we prepare a closing statement and we list all the expenses on the seller's side. As I said, real estate commission, the title fees, recording fees, everything. And we put on the seller's side, seller relocation. So technically it'd be coming from let's say the sale price, and see whatever's left. So let's just say, like I said, let's just say the sale price was 400 and there's $50,000 in deductions and there's 300 and 50,000 left. That's what the lender would take. Everything else would go to closing costs, pay the seller, pay the realtors, pay everything. So it's technically the lender paying it. Okay. How to qualify candidates. Let's see. Okay. So when I first started doing short sales, the main thing that the banks would look at is two things. One, they would want to see that the seller really didn't have any money. They would look at their hardship, and they would look at, of course, the value of the house. As I said, if the house is worth 400, look at, and make sure the offer was somewhat fair market value. If the house is worth 400,000 and people would think, oh, I'm paying cash, I'm going to offer 200,000. No, the banks are not going to take that. They may take 80% less, something like that. I mean, 20% less, but they're not going to take 50% less. So these are the things they would look at to determine whether or not they qualify the person. That's why I said I don't think short sales should take that long, because they're really not looking at much. So what started happening is there started being so many foreclosures and property values started dropping. Then what happened? People who could actually afford the property started basically giving up. They're like, wow, I owe 400,000 on my house. My neighbor's house just sold for 200,000. Why am I paying this? And so people who could afford it would actually give. And that's literally what happened with me. Like the property in Melbourne, I'm making the payments, and I'm asking them to do a short sale, and they denied me because I was current. So what I did is I actually stopped making the payments. I didn't make the next month payment and submitted the short sale, the exact same contract again. And they approved it. Because why? Now they realized, okay, this guy's not going to make any more payments. It was what's called a strategic default. And they said, well, if we don't accept this offer, this could go on for 5 years. And they accepted it. But when I was making the payments, they didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to help me, So sometimes they actually force people who could actually make the payments, stop making payments. And that's, what a strategic default is. Okay, 7 steps to a short sale, and we're going to go through each one in detail. 1 is gather the information. 2 is open communication with lender. 3 is list the property. 4 is obtain an offer. 5, submit an offer or proposal. 6, negotiate the deal, and 7, close the deal. Okay. All right. So gather information. So basically, the bank wants to look at the seller's financials. So you're going to get bank statements, tax returns, pay stubs. They're going to fill out a financial form. You know, you're going to do a hardship letter. You're going to provide an authorization. So you're going to gather all this information together at the beginning, you know. Then also, you want to find out which bank you're dealing with, because each bank has different things. Like, for instance, Bank of America had certain forms that had to be filled out. So you want to figure out which bank you're dealing with, okay? But now one thing I just remembered that I forgot about is when I said about why banks would take less money, okay? Another thing too, at the time, a lot of banks had agreements with the government where they really weren't losing money. They were taking less money, but the government was actually reimbursing them the money. So they weren't really losing any money. So, and that's another thing when I mentioned about loan modifications. So if a bank was doing a short sale and getting paid, you know, what they received plus the difference from the government, why would they do a loan modification where they're getting all their money back regardless? So that was another thing at the time that, you know, you had to consider, because, you know, these banks weren't losing, they, you know, acted like they're losing money, but they're getting their money from the government. So I said communication with the lender. So now the next thing, you're going to list the property. Okay. Now, when I say list the property, you want to list the property for fair market value. You know, when short sale started, I remember like people would like list. No, I apologize. Not 60 consecutive pay stubs, like 2 months. So that's wrong. I'll have to go fix that. Is that wrong? Yeah, that's wrong. It should say 60 days pay stubs. The slides are actually already on the website. Okay, so as I said, you're going to list the property for fair market value. As I said, when short sales first started, people would like, they owed, let's say, 500,000, house was worth 300, they would list it for 500. No one's going to buy it for 500, and the banks know that. So just list it for what you think it's worth, right? But the key is, of course, to get a contract. So of course, if you're not getting an offer, you know, keep lowering the price, you know, until you do get an offer. You're going to list the houses as is. Now, that's another thing. Like when I first started in the real estate industry, people mainly use the FAR bar contract. And that's what happened with short sales. The bank started requiring as-is contracts. And ever since then, everyone's been using the as-is contract, as, you know, mainly since then. But before that, it was mainly just a plain FAR bar contract. Also, of course, make sure, you know, you let the people know that it's a short sale. It happened many closings where we were doing the short sale, and buyer goes, I didn't know this was a short sale. They had no idea. So make sure that people are aware of it so they, you know, don't use that as an excuse. Okay. Now, of course, your ultimate goal is to get a contract. See, the lender's not going to review anything unless you have a contract. So once you have a contract, that's when you want to submit everything. You basically want to submit, as I said, the financials, all the documents, the contract. And generally, truthfully, a lender does not, unless they suspect fraud, a lender really never says we're denying the short sale, from my experience, okay? Usually, I mean, they may either accept it, they may tell you, no, we want this amount, but it's rare that they just say you're denied, okay, unless they suspect fraud, which I'll talk about after too. Like, but the truth is, like, if you may see sometimes on the MLS which says approved short sale, truthfully, there's no such thing as an approved short sale. Because as I said, every time they get a new contract, they have to review it, okay? What that really means when you see approved short sale, it means that they probably had another contract before, and they know what the bank will accept. So if they had a contract, let's say for 280, the bank says, no, we want 300. Now they know the bank wants 300. So now, of course, when they relist it, they know they got to get a contract for 300,000. So that's when people kind of really mean when they say approved short sale, okay? And still, even then, a lot of times these banks, you have to resubmit and it doesn't happen overnight. It may be quicker because now they have a negotiator they're dealing with, stuff like that, you know. Make sure, you know, in the short sale addendum, which we're going to talk about after, it says, you know, that you use that because that's what makes it contingent on the bank approving it. Because in normal situations, like if you just use the regular contract and you're selling the house for 400, you owe 500. If the bank says, no, we're not approving the short sale, the seller has to come out of pocket the difference, 100,000. Okay. But if you make it contingent on the bank approving it, then the seller, if it's not approved, they can cancel it. They don't have to come out of pocket. So make sure you use the short sale addendum. Also, whenever you do a contract, make sure you get a deposit. Okay. What a lot of people do is, Phil wrote, sometimes we had a letter from the bank approving a listing price for a certain amount. Does that still happen? Actually, there was a time Washington Mutual was doing that. They don't exist anymore. And they would tell the people what they want. But they stopped doing that because what would happen is the people knew, okay, they'll take this amount, and that's exactly what they would get, even if the house was really worth more. So they were actually realized we're losing money. So they did that for some time, but they stopped doing that. So as I was saying about the deposit, what happened is people would just start putting offers on all these short sales, okay, with no deposits, and people would accept it. And then what happens is you would go through the short sale process, you thinking you had a buyer, you get it approved, and you find that the buyer's nowhere in sight, because guess what? They had no skin in the game. They never gave a deposit, So you want to treat. It was only about a $75,000 deal. And I get the contract and I look at the name, like, this name sounds familiar. So I look at, our program we use, and I see the same buyer on another property. So I pull that file too. And both deals were for, like I said, about $75,000. And I look at the proof of funds and they have $80,000 in the bank. So guess what? They're not buying two properties. They're buying one. What they were doing is submitting multiple offers, and probably the first one that gets approved, they're going to go with. So imagine you're going through the whole short sale process. 3 months pass. You think you finally get approved, and you find out the buyer bought something else. Okay. But if they had $5,000 in escrow, they're not going to do that. So make sure, like I said, treat it like a regular deal. Get a deposit, okay? So here's, like I said, the short sale approval contingency. The addendum. So of course, number 1 talks about, hang on a second. That it's contingent on the bank approving it. They have to submit the application within a certain amount of times. Now, here, number 4 says, if seller does not deliver a copy of seller's accepted short sale approval to buyer within, it says 90 days, then the buyer can cancel. Yeah, as I said, you want to make sure you have the right buyer. So, and as I said, on average, you want to give the buyer, you want to make sure you have a buyer who gives you 90 days to get it approved. If the buyer puts 30 days in there, don't even accept that offer, because it's not going to happen. And there's no way you're going to get an approval and close within 30 days. Okay. The time periods. Okay. Other than the deposit, everything starts after approval. So after approval is when the inspection period starts, the loan approval period starts, everything. Okay. But this is another tip also. If you're doing a short sale, have them do the inspection at the beginning. Okay. And here's why. 2 things. 1, if you're negotiating with the lender and there's issues with the house, it's going to help you get a cheaper price. Okay. And 2, you don't want to go through the whole short sale process. The buyer does their inspection and they cancel. Now you have to start over. So it's better to know from the beginning what the issue is. And you know how many times that we also have that happen, where we get an approval, the buyer does their inspection. Now all of a sudden they want a discount because of the inspection. And now we have to go back to the lender. Guess what the negotiator says? We've been working on this 4 months, and now you're asking me for another $10,000 credit. Why didn't you tell us for this at the beginning? And then guess what? Now another couple of months has to pass for them to review it. So it's better to know right from the beginning the inspection. So I would make sure they do their inspections at the beginning. The closing date, you would put a certain amount of time after the approval letter, of course. And then what else? Here, like I mentioned about the backup offers, you want to check off that they can't get any other offers. And of course, number 10 says termination about foreclosure sale. So if the seller did lose the house in foreclosure, the contract's automatically terminated and the buyer gets their deposit back. Hang on a second. Oh, so with the title fees, which short sales would generally always check off number 1? Seller shall designate closing agent and pay for owner's policy. So pretty much, other than Dade and Broward, pretty much most of the rest of the state of Florida, the seller picks and pays. Okay. So as I said, when we submit the closing statement to the lender, you'd always put the title fees on the seller's side, basically requesting the seller the lender to pay for it. And they never say no, because that's what's common in Florida, rather than having the buyer pay for it. So we would check off number 1 where the seller picks and pays. And that's like me, like as an attorney, how we would get paid. We wouldn't charge anybody for negotiating these things. The agreement would be that we would negotiate it and then we do the closing. And that's where I would make my money, from the closing. So you would check off number 1, seller shall, pick and pay. Okay. And what else? Okay. So as I said, so now you have everything. You have all the seller's docs. You have the contract. You have the closing statement. You have the listing agreement. Oh, and that's another thing too. the property has to be listed, okay? Just kind of like I mentioned before about with the deed in lieu. So if you have a sell, so I'm just gonna sell it on my own. No, the bank wants the best possible offer. Having the property in the MLS where the whole world can see it is going to get you the best possible offer, you know? So it does have to be listed. But once again, the money's going to come from the lender for the money the lender's getting. So basically, you have all the stuff and you submit everything. And the lender's going to do what's called a broker's price opinion. It's like an appraisal where they would pay like realtors to basically give an opinion of what the house is worth. Okay. Now the lender's going to come back, like I said, they're either going to approve it or deny it if they suspect fraud, or make a counteroffer. Okay. And at this point is when we negotiate and try to get the bank to accept it. Okay. Now, if what they're asking for is really out of line, then of course we're going to send our own comps and try to get them to agree to what we want. Or another worst case scenario is where we'd hire a professional appraisal to appraise the property. So like if the bank is saying the house is worth 400, but the appraiser is saying it's worth 300, we're going to say, look, how's anyone going to get a loan? This is what it appraises for, and try to convince them to accept that. But as I said, but worst case scenario, they're going to say, we want this amount. The buyer says, no, I'm not going to increase my offer. Now you relist it, and you at least know exactly kind of what the bank is looking for. Ruth asked, do you have language for us to use in additional terms requiring buyer to the inspection period to begin? Yeah, I mean, if you need help when if you come across this, of course, contact me and I'll put something together for you. And of course, the ultimate goal is to get a complete and final release, where basically they release the buyer, the seller in full. Where, as I said, where you don't have the seller doesn't have to worry about anybody going after them for money, and we want to make sure that's in the approval letter. Okay, so close the deal. So of course, the ultimate goal is to close, where we all make money, where the realtors make money, the title company makes money, hopefully the seller makes money, and that's the ultimate deal. Now, just so you know, in a short sale, the seller is not supposed to get money unless it's approved by the lender, and it would be on the closing statement. So if they have some side deals, that's technically illegal, where if the buyer says, okay, well, I'll sell to you for 200 if you give me 25,000 aside. That's technically illegal. The only money they're supposed to get is what was approved by the bank and on the closing statement. Now, with everything, people always find a way to make money, and meaning fraud. And over the years, I saw many instances. One is basically when this was an incident happened. I had this realtor I worked with, and she was doing a short sale, but the buyer insisted that their title company negotiate the short sale, or the realtor did. I'm not sure. And she contacted me. She goes, listen, I'm doing a short sale, but I don't know, I just don't feel right. Something doesn't seem right with this. Can you speak to the bank? So she, gave me authorization to speak to the bank. I called the bank. I'm speaking to the negotiator, and I said, who do you have as the buyer? This the buyer, the same seller. Okay, we're good there. What's the sale price? And the contract she had was for 500,000. Well, the contract I had was for 750. So the person negotiating with the short sale was hoping to get it approved for a lower amount, and then tell the parties, okay, we got it approved for 750. And then basically, so let's say the actual money the bank wanted was 600, then keep that 150,000. Like that's this title company was trying to do. They were trying to basically, make the difference, but without people knowing the actual sales price. So as I said, people, will do stuff. Another thing was kind of like the ABC flip, where someone would tell the bank, okay, this is the best offer we have. Try to buy for that amount, but then right away have another buyer for a higher amount. Of course, it's kind of deceiving even though flips are illegal, but here you're lying to the bank because you're telling the bank this is the best offer we have, when you have other offers on the side. So what the bank started doing is, one, they started having the parties, the buyer, seller, realtor, sign an affidavit that they're not going to sell the property for 90 days or 120 days. Also, sometimes they would put in a deed what's called deed restrictions, where they would say this property cannot be sold for 120 days to stop the flips like that. Okay. Also, if the realtors signed these affidavits and did sell the property right away, some banks actually went after them. I remember a few realtors actually getting arrested for this, where the banks actually, did pursue them, for lying. Okay, mortgage insurance. Now, mortgage insurance is basically where people are getting, and people get this now also with FHA loans. Usually when they would get 100% loans, which is what was happening back then, people were getting 80-20 loans, 100%. They were required to get mortgage insurance. And what mortgage insurance is let's say the property went into foreclosure. You borrowed 400,000. It sells at auction for 350. the bank gets the difference, the 50,000 from the insurance, so they don't lose any money. They get 350 from the auction sale and 50,000 from the insurance. Okay. And at the time, these mortgage insurance, property values are going up. They're like, okay, we're great. We're never going to have to pay any claims. And of course, as you know, the market crashed. And when we first started doing short sales, we would go to the bank and ask them to take less. And the banks would be like, well, we have mortgage insurance. Why should we take less? If we foreclose, the bank is going to pay us, or the insurance is going to pay us the difference. And that's where, like I mentioned, the promissory notes and the cash contributions came into play. So the banks, which I'll explain. So what happened then is, at first, the banks really didn't want to do short sales because, as I said, they had insurance. So what happened is these mortgage insurance companies started having so many claims against them. Okay. They, like, because everyone was making claims. So what happened is they started investigating. So I started getting letters like crazy from these insurance companies asking for a copy of our file, because people were like, they'd buy 2 houses the same day, or they would say it's their primary residence, but really using it as a rental, things like that. And of course, if there was any deception in the application, they were denying the claims. Okay. So then the bank started realizing that the mortgage insurance was denying a lot of these claims. So that's when they started approving more of the short sales, because there was no guarantee they were going to get paid from the mortgage insurance companies. So that's where they would say to the people, okay, we'll take 100,000 less, but we want you to sign a promissory note for 15,000, paying us back 15,000, so we recoup some more of the money. We have insurance, we could get paid in full, but we will accept it if you. And that's where the short sales the promissory notes and the cash contributions came to play, where these banks had mortgage insurance, but they agreed to the short sale as long as the seller agreed to contribute a little more. Okay. Now, real estate commissions. Basically, the banks are going to pay what's industry standard. And what's industry standard is 6%. Okay. Like, I would get contracts with the realtors will put 12%, 10%. No, they're not going to pay that. They're going to pay what industry standards are, and that's 6%. Okay. Now, the truth is, the same realtor had the buyer and seller, they would try to reduce their commission. Okay. I don't think it's right, but they would try to do that. So, like, I recommend one, if we ever have, especially with a short sale, if you ever have the buyer and seller both, maybe have a friend, your broker, somebody else be the other agent. Because if it was two people in the same company, they wouldn't reduce it. But if it was the same person, for some reason, they would reduce it, which was kind of crazy. Another thing too, if you're related to the buyer or the seller and you're the realtor, a lot of times they wouldn't pay your commission. Like, I remember one, it was the seller had her mom list the property. Like, who else is going to list the property? It's her mom. They paid the buyer's realtor's commission, but they wouldn't pay the mom. They said it was not an arm's length transaction. And I had a few I remember where they would actually go on social media, and if they saw like the realtor and the seller were like I had a couple, I can remember where they were actually engaged, and somehow they found it from social media and either denied it, saying it was not an arm's length transaction, or wouldn't pay the person. So as I said, when you're related to the person in a short, so you got to be careful with that, because they may not pay your commission or deny it. Okay. 1099 tax form 92. Now, this is another thing sellers are concerned with. Basically, the money that is waived is taxable income. Okay. They get what's called a 1099, where they have to claim this on their taxes as income. And that's pretty scary. Let's say the bank waives $200,000. You're like, I got to pay tax on $200,000. Okay. Well, there were and are ways to get around it. Back in the day, there was to be something called the Mortgage Forgiveness Debt Relief Act. And if it was your primary residence, the 1099 would be automatically waived. Okay. That doesn't no longer exist. Okay. Another would be, of course, then just so you guys know, like I didn't mention this before, I've probably closed well over 2,000 short sales, negotiated probably well over 5,000. And I never ever had one client come screaming and yelling to me, oh my God, I had to pay all these taxes, because there's always usually a way to get around it. Another way is like business loss. If you bought this as an investment property, lost money, And another way is what I'd say people use now is what's called a tax form 982, where the seller would claim insolvency. So on this form, the seller lists all their assets and all their liabilities. If their liabilities are more than their assets, they are considered insolvent and there's no tax liability. But what's good about this form is, even though you already sold the house, you get to list the house you sold as a liability. So, listing that big debt as a liability usually makes people, upside down where they're considered insolvent and they don't have to pay the taxes. But as I said, usually most accounts find a way to get around this. It's true. I easily closed over 2,000 of these and never had a client, coming back to me screaming about how much they had to pay. Even me, like I said, I did 3 short sales. I didn't have to pay a dime in taxes. So there are always ways to, get around it. Now, this is the biggest problem with short sales, association fees. Now, when I meet with a client and they're having issues, does that work with a strategic default? Hang on a second. What was the question? Okay. Well, Ruth asked, does that work with a strategic default? At the time, with that mortgage forgiveness debt relief act, if it was your primary forgiveness. Hello? Oh, at the time, if it was your primary, it was relieved automatically. But with the Form 92, yes, if your assets, if your liabilities are more than your assets, even if you did it intentionally, it does apply with that tax Form 92. But you have to show that your liabilities are more than your assets. But as I said, you can count the house as a liability. Okay. Now, as I said, the biggest issue with short sales is HOA fees. Now, when I meet with clients, I always tell them, okay, if you're having problems paying, don't pay your mortgage, don't pay your taxes, don't pay your insurance.
Oh, it was good one. It was good one. It was good one.
Someone's speaking. I think it's Sadie. Sadie, can you put yourself on mute?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I tell people, don't pay your mortgage, don't pay your tax, don't pay your insurance, but pay your association fees. Why? Because the associations are aggressive. Okay. See, what happens every month? Let's say the association has their board meetings, and who goes to their board meetings? Their attorney. Okay. So what happens? So they're going to ask their attorney, okay, what's going on with unit 115? What's going on with unit 124? So of course the attorney wants to keep that business. So they're going to be aggressive with these people to either get paid or get them out of there. Okay. And associations can't foreclose on you. So I would see people that haven't made a mortgage payment for 3 years. They stop paying the association and now they're losing the house in 6 months. Okay. So pay your associate, make sure they pay their association fees. Another thing too is when the house is foreclosed on, the bank has to pay the association fees, either 12 months HOA fees or 1% of the mortgage that was owed. Okay. The lower of. Okay. So just example, let's say the mortgage payments the HOA fees are $200 a month and the bank foreclosed. Now they got to pay them $2,400, right? But now let's just say the person has made HOA fees in 3 years. And now you're asking, as I said, when we do the closing statement, we tell the bank what they want them to pay. Let's say we ask them to pay $10,000 to HOA. What are they going to say? Why should we give the HOA $10,000 when if we foreclose, all we got to give them is, $2,000? Okay. So that would always be a problem. And here's what would happen. We would find out what the bank is willing to pay, and then we would go to the association and try to get them, of course, to take less, than it was owed. But here's what happened. Who's on the board? Homeowners. And guess what? These homeowners usually hate that person who's doing the short sale or not paying the HOA fees, because what happens? If I'm living in a condo and I'm not paying my fees, and guess what happens? Everyone else's fees are raised because of me, right? So of course, what happens is when you're asking them to take less, they don't think business-wise, like, okay, yeah, let's just get rid of this person. Let's get someone new to get in there. They're like, I hate this person and I'm not going to do anything to help this person. So screw them. I don't care if they go in foreclosure. I'm not going to take less money. So guess what? It makes it really hard to negotiate, So as I said, make sure they pay the association fees. Okay. Now, FIRPTA, this is Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act. As I said, not next week, the week after, we're having a class on this. And I have a specialist on this speaking. Okay, so this is basically when you're dealing with a foreign national seller. The title company is supposed to hold back 10 to 15% of the sales price. And the purpose of it is, like, for instance, let's just say the person's from Brazil. Their IRS is worried that the person's going to sell the house, go back to Brazil, and not pay any taxes. So it's to force them to do their taxes. So let's just say we had to hold back, let's just say it was a $400,000 sale. We had to hold back $40,000. It's not like the IRS gets $40,000. It's basically once the person does their taxes, let's say they owe $5,000, IRS gets $5,000, that person gets back to $35,000. It's just to force them to do their taxes. Okay. Now with short sales, here's the problem though. Now, where's that money going to come from? Okay, the person's already upside down. Where's that 40,000 going to come from? Okay. So what happens is when you're doing a short sale and it's a foreign national, they have to get an accountant involved and they have to get what's called like a tax withholding certificate, where they would basically apply with the IRS and say, listen, we're upside down, we're doing a short sale. Let's say this was a loss, it was an investment property or whatever. Here's shows you we're not going to owe any money. Allow us to sell the property. And the IRS would give them a form allowing them to sell the property where no money's got to be held. So it can be done with a foreign national, with a FERPA situation, but you definitely have to get an accountant involved to get that tax withholding certificate. Also, there is a couple of exceptions. One is if the sale price is under 300,000 and the buyer's going to live in the property, we don't have to hold back any money. So that's, interesting. So it's a short sale. And another thing, also make sure, because as I said, what happened if it's a 300,000 under 300,000, the buyer would sign an affidavit that they're going to live in there. So you got to make sure, do not get a buyer as a corporation, because a corporation cannot sign an affidavit that they're going to live in the property. Also other liens. So basically when we're doing a short sale, everything has to be paid. So of course, if there's a second mortgage, home equity line, IRS liens, judgments, Y green pays, any liens on the property, we have to get taken care of. So of course we do a title search. If other things come up, we need to negotiate with them as well. Now, what happens is if a property, let's just say, like I said, the person owes 400,000 and they have a first mortgage for 350 and a second mortgage for 50. And the house sells at auction for 300, that first mortgage gets all the money. The second mortgage gets zero. They get wiped out. So what would normally happen when there was a second mortgage? These companies knew that they would get zero for foreclosed on, and we would offer them $3,000 to $8,000, and they would generally take that and go away. Okay, so it wasn't like the second mortgage usually would get very little, and they would also same thing, give a full release to the buyer. IRS lien, same thing. Is like when a person owed money to the IRS would still be owed the money, but they would give us same thing, a certificate or an approval letter authorizing us to sell the property. It would be like a partial release authorizing us to sell the property without paying them, because they saw the sellers getting no money. So we would basically, send them everything, same thing, the closing statement, everything, show them the IRS that they're getting no money. Judgment, same thing. Like let's say people owe money to the credit cards, things like that. We would have to negotiate with them to make sure that's taken care of at closing, because sometimes those stick. Now, this is the new thing, which could be interesting. These Y green PACE loans, these loans people are getting, for like these solar panels, these things like that. This is new. And what a lot of people realize, these are actually liens and mortgages on the property. So if a person's going to foreclosure, these are going to have to be taken care of somehow. I haven't come across this yet, so I don't know how they're going to handle it, if they're going to actually agree to take less money or what they're going to do. But this will definitely be something that, we will have to know and negotiate with, if that situation arises. Now the foreclosure timeline, okay. So basically, once a person stops making payments, they're going to get what's called a notice of default from their lender. Usually, letter tell them, hey, you have to get current within 30 days or whatever, we're going to file foreclosure. That could come after 60 days, after 90 days, but they get this letter. Now, then at some point, if they still don't make payments or get caught up, the bank's going to file a foreclosure action. And this is what's called the lis pendens, when they actually record something with the county that shows the house is in foreclosure. So like before the lis pendens, like people always contact me for a foreclosure list, this and that. No one really knows that they're behind, honestly, before that, because it's not public records. But the second that lis pendens is filed, everybody knows. And that's when that person is going to start getting letters, phone calls, everything like that. 1 second. Yeah, I'm doing the class. Hang on a second. Okay, so as I said, so lis pendens. So what happens? Then they're served with the foreclosure papers. Usually, like I said, like they get served, meaning the paperwork's given to them. From the day they're served, they have 20 days to respond. Okay. And what happens if they don't respond? They get what's called a default judgment. And then what happens? The bank sets a foreclosure sale date, and the house is auctioned off. So one, if you're ever dealing with a client in this situation, make sure they get to an attorney. Because like one thing we would do was we provide what's called foreclosure defense, where we would respond, we'd file motion to dismiss with subpoena documents, things to delay the foreclosure as long as possible to give you a chance to sell the property. Because of course, the more time you have, the more chance you have of selling it. But if they do nothing and they get a default judgment against them, the house, could be auctioned off pretty quick. So you definitely want to get someone involved, to delay the foreclosure, and make sure they respond. And now another thing too, up until the house is sold to the auction, they're still the owners. So let's say you meet with someone, they say, well, listen, my house is being auctioned off next month. They're still the owners and they can still sell. So even though the auction's coming up, you can still, try to sell the property. Now, when foreclosure first started, we would go to the judge and say, oh, Your Honor, we're doing a short sale. We need 6 more months. No problem. Here's the continuance. Okay. But what happened, of course, people started, deceiving the judge. They would create their own, fake contracts. Your Honor, we need 6 more months. And the judge started seeing that these were all fake and then stopped, of course, really helping people because so normally if the person, of course, been in foreclosure and their house for free for 5 years, no, the bank, the day before a sale, you ask the judge, can we get more time? The judge is probably not going to help you. But if you've been in foreclosure for like a year and it's the first time asking the judge for more time, they're going to work with you. They really don't want you to lose their house unless they feel you're taking advantage of the system. Okay. Now that's what I mentioned about foreclosures defense before is where, going to court, delaying the foreclosure to give you as much time as possible and to make sure that the house is not sold from underneath you. Because that's what happened with a lot of people I remember where they were in foreclosure and then they contact the bank about doing a loan modification, thinking the bank's helping them, thinking the bank's, going to help them. Next thing you know, the house is auctioned off and they had no idea. So it's, having someone stay on top of that as well. I guess that's it. Any questions?
The great one there is, of course, contacting the bank and getting them to answer, and then to start and to continue speaking to the same person with multiple phone calls. I think that's the whole thing that slows everything up, because you never speak to the same person twice, and you've got to go through all of the whole file.
Yeah, what some banks started doing, like Bank of America, they had a system called Equator, where because what would happen is just like what Phil just said, is you would submit everything, you call back, oh, we never got anything. You have to submit it. It was just, oh my God, it was just so annoying, the process, And what some banks did, like Bank of America did, they started a thing called Equator, where you would upload the documents, so everything was online. So that made it a little, easier. But yeah, that was definitely a problem. Like every time you call, you get a different person, you're not speaking to the same people. They're missing documents, and it's just, yeah, it's definitely not run by banks as smooth as it should have been. But definitely, if you come across a situation like this, it's really on your end, just like any other deal. You're listing the property, you're getting a contract, and then, like, let's say like us, we do the short sale negotiation, so no charge as long as we're doing the closing. You have someone negotiating, hopefully it gets approved and you close and you make money. That's the ultimate goal. But so I definitely wouldn't turn them away. I definitely wouldn't be scared of them. So yeah. See, any other question?
One of the things, yeah, I have a statement question, so to speak. One of the things, especially during the foreclosure process, that I guess realtors have to understand and note that even if you have a property listed and the seller decide that he wants to allow the property to go into foreclosure because for whatever reason, it's a divorce situation, take for instance, and he wants that property to go into foreclosure, and he actually owes less than the property was listed for. One of the key things here to keep in mind is that the banks cannot make a profit from the foreclosure proceedings. So if that property is valued more than the foreclosure amount, that particular seller or his wife or ex-wife can put a claim for the difference within 30 days after that property has been foreclosed, and they will receive the residual balance as well. So if the property was worth $600,000, foreclosed for $300,000, they can put a claim in for the additional $300,000 thereafter, and they have 30 days to do so.
Yeah, if you guys, like what he's saying is basically if the house is worth, if there's equity in the house and it gets foreclosed on, that the money, the seller does not just lose that money. They could still get the money, but they have to file what's the exact word? I'm trying to think of the exact word. Where they would file a motion, the surplus, that's it, surplus. They'd file a motion to get the surplus funds from the bank and from the courthouse, and the court would give them a check for the difference. So it's not like they lose it all. But of course, at foreclosure, like it's definitely gonna sell for less than on the market. So 100% better. Spite says, you know, I'm going to work, so I'm just gonna like go through foreclosure, and they have equity. They're probably costing themselves money, because if they're probably doing a traditional sale, they would probably, and also what it's all about the foreclosure defense. Even if there's equity, you definitely want to get foreclosure defense to delay it as much as time, because the longer it goes on, the more chance you have to sell on the property. Okay. Any other questions? So I'll just wrap it up, I guess. So one more thing, like what said, on Tuesday, we're doing that top producer mastermind with Megan Romine. I posted the link again if you guys want to sign in. Tuesday, we're also doing that pies and prosecco giveaway. If you're in the area, stop by my office, pick up some pies, pick up prosecco. On Wednesday, once again, that asktherealestateattorney.com, go on there, join the program, use code LAW, and you'll be eligible for the $1,000 cash raffle on Wednesday. And my plan is to do a $1,000 Bruno, to do a $1,000 cash raffle each month. And as I said, we have what else? We have a lot of great classes coming up. I have like December calendar being worked on now. And if you guys have any suggestions for classes, please let me know. And also during the week, if you have any questions, you need help in anything, reach out to me. I'm always there. All right. Any last things? Wrap it up.
If I may, you said that it was best to get the seller to contact an attorney to help with this whole process. Well, the chances are maybe they can't pay for an attorney. So
Yeah.
A title company usually has an attorney, and some title companies are very good at this, some aren't, So it's not really the sort of thing that we should take on ourselves totally without getting either a title company or an attorney involved for the actual negotiations, especially if you're asking for delays.
Well, okay, so in 2007, I had a partner, business partner, and I kind of saw what was happening. I started advertising foreclosure defense. I started doing mailers. And we actually got in a big fight one month because I spent $750 on posts. She thought it was, a waste of money, basically. And we ended up splitting up that year. And as I said, the foreclosures, the short sales, really what got me through the bad times. I ended up getting so many foreclosure clients, things like that. And a lot of people were charging people monthly fees. Like say for loan, that was the crazy thing. They're selling, we're gonna help you get a loan modified, but you have to pay us a month. Every month, let's say $500. So what incentive did an attorney have to actually help the person? Because the longer they drag this on, the more money they're making, But what I would do is I would do like a flat fee, between $500 and $1,500, what I did at the time back then. Now it's a little different, I'd say, because you got to go to court so much. But I would also work. But if a person truly had no money and I knew I was going to do the closing, I would make money from the closing, I wouldn't charge them, like upfront fee. If I knew, like I said, I'm going to do the short sale, I'm going to do the closing. But then sometimes you actually had people who, once again, took advantage of you. They're like, they really had no intention of selling the property. They have now an attorney representing them for free, delaying the foreclosure, and they're just trying to stay there as long as possible. So as an attorney, I would just gauge the situation. If a person truly has having a hardship, of course, I'm going to help them. If a person's taking advantage of me and the realtor, no, I'm not going to help them, So yeah, so every situation is different, but yeah, if a person truly does not have money in the past, I would definitely, not say, no, either you to help me or I'm not going to do anything for you. No. So every situation is different.
So could a realtor or the broker charge a referral consultation negotiation fee for this? Is that getting too close to legal?
Well, I know there was a lot of companies that did short sale negotiations and charge and try to get the lender to pay. Like they would put it on the closing statement. They would charge a short sale negotiation fee, like realtors did. Some banks would pay it, honestly, and some wouldn't. Some would make it like example, transaction fees. They would never pay that. They always made us remove that. For some reason, they would always make us remove the transaction fee. With the realtor charge or the processing fee. But yeah, I definitely remember some realtors who would, who would try to charge like a transaction fee or whatever. And some banks would pay it and some wouldn't. So just like the relocation fee, we try. There's no guarantee. As I said, I never lie to a person, say, yeah, we're definitely going to get you this money, but we try. So the same thing, we always try.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was cash for keys, wasn't it? $3,000, get out.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing too. They would do it. The banks would try to just pay the people to leave. Say, hey, we'll give you this amount of money, leave the house, broom swept, and you give us the keys, we give you some money, and we both go our own way. Any last questions?
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, well, I hope everybody has a great day, and hope you can log in on Tuesday, and hopefully enter that raffle. AskTheRealEstateAttorney.com. $1,000 cash. We're gonna do it on Instagram Live Wednesday between 10 and 11. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Giovanni.